Hi, welcome back to Elite Literary Book Room. This is Rachel Beck, and I'm going to go over chapters 10 and 11 of To Kill a Mockingbird, which will actually finish part 1. So you're getting a little bit more of the episodes of the coming of age. And chapter 10, it starts off with Atticus was feeble. He was nearly 50. When Jim and I asked why he got so old, he said he got started late, which we felt reflected upon his abilities and manliness. He was much older than the parents of our school contemporaries. Now, what she keeps leading up to here is, how the kids see their father. And he's not a young dad. He can't play football. This really upsets Jim because at the time the football teams of the Baptist would play the Methodist. And so, this was a big deal in the town, and he says he's too old for that. He's too old to tackle. And in her mind, her father doesn't do anything. In fact, she says, he did not do the things our schoolmates' fathers did. He never went hunting. He did not play poker or fish or drink or smoke. He sat in the living room and read. This is my kind of man. But not an exciting father. And so this is, of course, the way she's going to start the chapter, because at the end, you'll see that he does something that really is impressive to them. And so the air rifles come back up, and of course Atticus doesn't really want much to do with it, but he does say, I know that eventually you're going to go after birds. Shoot all the blue jays that you can if you can hit them. But remember, it's a sin to kill a mockingbird. So at this point, we really don't know why the title is To Kill a Mockingbird. But you know this is going to be a symbol. And that Atticus makes a direct statement that it is a sin. And Scout says, I've never even heard him say it was a sin to do anything. So you'll see it come back up again, kind of like a motif. But Maudie says to Scout, mockingbirds don't do one thing but make music for us to enjoy. They don't eat at people's gardens. They don't nest in corn cribs. They don't do one thing but sing their hearts out for us. And that's why it's a sin to kill a mockingbird. And so at the very end, the title will kind of come back up again, and you'll see it come full circle. But just keep that in the back of your mind. So what ends up happening in this chapter is that there's a mad dog, and the dog obviously has rabies, and this must be something that comes out periodically because you hear them say, well, it's only February, so it must be, the wrong time of year for this to be happening. But it's happening, and it could be very dangerous. So Calpurnia, sees it. She warns the neighbors. And the big scene in this whole chapter is that the sheriff, Mr. Tate, was there with Atticus. They're looking at the dog. They know they need to shoot it, and they need to do it fast, and they need to do it as, they want to do it as painlessly as possible. So tells, Mr. Tate tells Atticus, you take it. You shoot it. And the kids are like, oh no, Mr. Tate, he doesn't know how to shoot a gun. But, you know, he had a life before he had kids, and he does know how to do certain things. He just doesn't talk about it. He doesn't brag about things. But obviously he has this reputation. And she says that, you know, he looked like a underwater swimmer. And that's the way she describes the time. Like moments in memory, if you think back, it almost feels like they're not even real. And so here he is, you know, he's fooling with his glasses. She mentioned earlier that he's practically blind in his left eye, which I can relate. I'm blind in my left eye. That's why when I'm reading, I'm like, stumbling on it because I can't really see very well. And in a moment, Atticus rubbed his eyes and chin. We saw him blink hard. And I'm skipping a little bit. With moments so swift they seemed simultaneous, Atticus' hands yanked the ball-tip lever as he brought the gun to his shoulder. The rifle cracked. Tim Robinson leaped, that's the dog, flopped over and crumpled on the sidewalk. He didn't know what hit him. So it was a very clean shot. And the kids are extremely impressed with this. Jim's just, you know, in all of him, which, you know, should tell you something about what people take pride in. This is still kind of an immature thing to say that somebody is worthy because they can do this skill, and completely miss maybe some of the other things about Atticus that truly makes him heroic. But at this moment, for the kids, this is the moment they think, wow. And Huck says to Jim, can't you speak? Don't you know your daddy was the best shot in the county? And Atticus' reaction is, oh, hush. And then later, Scout and Jim talk about it, and she says, you know, I'm going to tell everyone my daddy's the best shot. And Jim says, no, you're not. If he doesn't want people to know about it, then don't say anything. And at the very end of the chapter, he says, you know, Atticus is a gentleman, just like me. And you saw, like, a couple of chapters ago, he was saying, well, if you're a lawyer, I don't want to be a lawyer, you know. So how quickly he changes. So this is to set up also the next chapter, though. When you meet Mrs. Dubose, who's not a very nice lady. She's old. Scout says, you know, if I was as sunny as I could be and said, hey, Mrs. Dubose, I would receive the answer, don't you say hey to me, you ugly girl. You say good afternoon, Mrs. Dubose. She's much older, okay, so she's from a very different generation. She's extremely prejudiced. And this is what really gets to Jim. For some reason, he snaps because she makes these comments about his dad being trash. He also says that Scout's going to end up waiting on tables, so you can see how long ago this was. And she says, you know, you should be ashamed of your dad lawing for niggers, is what she says. And she brings this up quite often. Now, when she sees Atticus, though, of course she doesn't say that. She's almost flattered that Atticus will stop and comment on her flowers and tell her, you know, you look as good as a picture. Scout says, he never says a picture of what. But there's this little, you know, conversation in between, and it's probably the nicest part of her day. Just to have Atticus, who's well respected. So you see how she changes her tune when she's around him. And then behind his back to her, she taunts the children. And people of her generation really didn't have any empathy for kids. It was almost like they thought they were immune to it and didn't deserve to be treated with any kind of respect at all. And even though Jim is hearing a lot of this from neighbors and so forth, for some reason she gets to him. And then so he had a little money and he bought Scout this baton she really wanted, and then he ends up destroying Mrs. Dubose's flowers with it and breaking the baton. So of course Scout was very upset about this. But you can see this loyalty she has with Jim because she got over it and was more worried about what would happen to Jim once her dad found out. And of course he did find out. And so he says that you have to go apologize to her. And, and they tell him, you know what she's saying about you. You know this is happening. Atticus is not fazed by it. And says she's an old, sick lady. And so even someone who's attacking him and is making things difficult for his children, he still wants his children to see that we need to have compassion for her. She probably doesn't really know what she's saying. And she may not even realize that what she's saying is wrong because she comes from a very different generation. So he's basically teaching them a lot about tolerance. The concepts that you learn about this book is there's courage, integrity, tolerance, and empathy are the main ones. And so being able to, again, put yourself in her shoes. She's old, she's miserable. This is all she does. But anyway, so Jim has to now go and apologize, and he comes back and says, she wants me to read to her. And he's going to have to do this like every day, I think except for like 2 hours, which is just trying to get students to read for 20 minutes a day is really hard. But that also shows you kind of the different time. So the book he's going to read is called Ivanhoe, which is Sir Walter Scott, and it's a very long book. It's, I don't know, maybe 17th century, 18th century. I wouldn't even want to sit and read this book. I certainly wouldn't want to read it out loud for 2 hours. So what a difference, that Jim, who's barely even 12 years old, is going to go and read this book. Nowadays that would just be unheard of, but that's the way it was. So at any rate, he comes there, Scout tags along. She says something like, I see you brought that dirty little sister of yours. And he said, my sister ain't dirty and I ain't scared of you. But Scout says, I noticed his knee shaking. And he reads, and then she has this very unpleasant drooling, like she describes it, of going out and then coming back in. And fascinating descriptions here. It glaciered down and then somehow slurps back. And if you've been in a nursing home, it's sad, but it's also the smell. She describes it as oppressive. And sitting up close with somebody like this, especially if it's not your family, it's not someone you're very close to, that would be kind of a hard thing for a kid to do. So he ends up having to do it for 1 more week. Atticus says, just do it 1 more week for me. And every time she's got like this alarm clock, and then it gets to where it's seems like it's getting shorter. So Mrs. Dubose ends up dying, and what that whole thing was about was the fact that she was a morphine addict, because naturally they'd give her morphine for pain. And she was determined, though, that she wouldn't die an addict. She didn't want to be tied, I think she calls it like beholden to anything, to where anything has a grip on herself, on her soul. She wanted to die free of an addiction. Now, this is why, I mean, I would think, yeah, give me the morphine. Let me die in my sleep. But Atticus wants to show the kids that this is real courage. I wanted to show you, he says, that courage isn't, a man with a gun in his hand. Courage is when you know you're licked, but you do it anyway. Which also sounds very similar to his own situation. When you know you're licked, when you know you're not going to win. If you know that you may not, there's something you really want in life and you may not make it. And it's scary to say that you want to do something like be an actor or be a writer. And you know the odds are against you. But true courage is doing it anyway and not worrying about what other people think. So it's not something that is external so that other people can say, oh, look what this person did. It's internal. It's the inner journey. And that's what was important to her in the end. And so it's just sort of another little episode for the kids to see something out of the ordinary about somebody. You see them in one light. Atticus says you got to see him in another light. She wasn't all bad. Yes, she was sick. Yes, she may have been very ignorant in many ways, but she also had a little bit of integrity, just with her own ability to, fight something, fight an addiction. That takes courage. So, at any rate, I'll just stop there because that kind of ends this whole part 2. And then I'll get into ends part 1, and then I'll get into part 2 next time. All right, thanks for watching.